April 1945. Europe was standing on the edge of the war's end, but for the soldiers on the front lines, it was just another day they had to survive. No one trusted talk of a quick finale. Too many times, hope had been followed by another battle. Morning came to the Elbe River, wrapped in thick fog. It spread over the water like a heavy blanket, erasing the far shore and turning the world into a pale, shapeless space. An American patrol moved carefully along the riverbank. Their boots sank into the wet ground. Their breath rose in white clouds. They marched in silence. Words felt unnecessary here. Every small sound seemed too loud. The sergeant raised his fist, and the line froze. He listened. Somewhere in the fog, water splashed, followed by a faint metallic noise. Not a bird, not the wind. Something human. The soldiers slowly raised their rifles. Figures began to emerge from the gray haze. First, blurred outlines. Then helmets, long coats, the shapes of unfamiliar weapons. Soviet soldiers. They appeared so suddenly, it felt as if the fog itself had pushed them forward. Both groups stopped. Only a few dozen steps separated them. But those steps carried the weight of the entire war. No one shouted. No orders were given. Rifles came up almost at the same moment, a reflex sharpened by years of survival. Silence settled over the riverbank. It pressed against their ears. Even the river seemed to quiet. The soldiers stared at one another through their sights. Each man saw not an abstract enemy, but a face, tense, exhausted, smeared with dirt and travel. The air felt fragile, as if the world itself were balanced on a thin thread. Among the Soviet troops stood a young infantryman. His palms were slick with sweat against the cold metal of his rifle. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. Across from him stood an American about his age. Their eyes met, and in that instant there was no hatred, only fatigue, and a strange sense of recognition. The infantryman remembered his long march west, ruined cities, endless burials, the faces of friends who would never return. He remembered dreaming of the day he could finally lower his weapon. And suddenly he realized that day was standing right in front of him. If he pulled the trigger, the cycle would continue. If he didn't, something might change. The decision came quietly, like a whisper inside him. He slowly lowered his rifle. The movement was small, but the world seemed to hold its breath. His comrades froze. The Americans tensed, expecting a trick. Time stretched thin. Each second felt heavy and endless. The infantryman took a step forward. The ground squelched softly under his boot, a sound that seemed thunderous in the silence. He felt dozens of eyes on him, but he kept moving. Stopping within arm's reach, he lifted his empty hand and extended it forward. The gesture was simple, almost naive, yet it carried enormous courage. The American soldier stared at the outstretched hand as if it were a riddle. His mind raced between caution and the urge to believe. He saw a man risking everything, just as he was. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered his weapon and stepped forward. Their hands met. The handshake was firm, awkward, and unexpectedly warm. In that instant, the tension broke. The air itself seemed lighter. Someone let out a nervous laugh, and it spread like a signal. Rifles began to lower. Shoulders relaxed. Men stepped closer to one another. The fog still hung over the river, but between the two groups, it felt as if it had cleared. Soldiers approached, studying each other's faces, smiling cautiously. They tried to speak, stumbling over words they didn't share, yet understanding tone and intention. Someone offered cigarettes. Another clapped a new acquaintance on the shoulder. Simple gestures built a bridge faster than any command could. The young infantryman and the American stood side by side, still slightly stunned. They exchanged a few broken phrases, each understanding only fragments. But it was enough. Relief colored their voices. They laughed at their own fear and at how close they had come to another pointless tragedy. Soon the riverbank filled with movement. Soldiers pulled photographs from their pockets, shared stories through gestures and scattered words. In this strange mixture of languages, a quiet sense of brotherhood emerged. These were men who had survived the same storm and recognized it in each other. The sun began to break through the fog, casting soft light across the water. The river flowed on calmly, indifferent to borders and ideologies, as if reminding them that wars pass, but life continues. The soldiers stood together on its banks, armies that had advanced from opposite directions, now united in a single moment. They understood they were witnessing history. The meeting on the Elbe symbolized the approaching end of the war they had fought through years of blood and destruction. But for them, it was not a future textbook event. It was immediate and human, the simple joy of being alive. And yet a shadow lingered beneath that joy. No one spoke of it, but beyond their small circle, new lines of tension were already forming. Today's allies might become tomorrow's rivals. History rarely offers simple endings. But on the banks of the Elbe, none of that mattered. Here there were only men allowing themselves, at last, to smile. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the river and feeling a rare sense of calm. The war was not officially over, but in their hearts, it was already fading. The young infantryman looked at the American and shook his hand again, this time without fear. There was no politics in the gesture, only gratitude that in a decisive moment they had both chosen trust. History would remember the generals, the treaties, and the dates. But the true meaning of that day lived in the quiet decision of a few men who chose not to fire. Sometimes it is these small, unseen choices that shape entire eras more than the loudest orders. And as the sun rose higher over the river, illuminating two armies that had met without a single shot, one truth became clear. Even in the darkest times, a person still has a choice between fear and hope, between the trigger and an outstretched hand. This story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments of history, the future can depend on a simple human choice. On the banks of the Elbe River in April 1945, soldiers who had every reason to fear each other chose trust over violence. That brief moment of courage and humanity became a lasting symbol of the end of one war and the fragile hope for peace. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found this story meaningful or learned something new, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting future videos. There are many more powerful historical stories ahead. I wish you success and good luck in everything you do, and I'll see you in the next video.